Hey there, all you beautiful Broadway babies. Welcome back to Broadway by Ghostlight. I'm Mark Benani, and this is episode 18 of Broadway Jeopardy. Can you believe it? Broadway Jeopardy is now a legal adult.
I don't think it works like that.
There's a brand new episode of Broadway Jeopardy every week, so make sure you're subscribed so you won't miss an episode. We've got 26 new clues and 5 new categories coming your way, so let's get right to this week's game. This is Broadway Jeopardy! Taking a look at this week's categories, we start off as always with last week's final Jeopardy category, which is Old Folks, looking at some elderly characters from musicals. That's followed by Audra McDonald, a whole category devoted to one of our best theatrical leading ladies working today. Then we have The Doctor Is In. This is a Patreon-picked category chosen by super patron Joy Easterling. Amazing suggestion, Joy. This category looks at some medical professionals in musicals. After that, it's Kings of Broadway. This category explores different royal figures seen in musicals. And the next category is Queens of Broadway. You can't have a king without a queen, right? This category is looking at literal queens in musicals. No questions about La Cage aux Folles. Wink. And we of course end with our final Jeopardy round, so keep track of your scores as we go and see how much fake dough you can rack up. We begin with the $200 round, the overture round as I call it, where the questions are on the easier side to help with your bounty before I loot you with the more dastardly hard questions later on. Starting with Old Folks, your first clue is, in the musical Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, this is who accompanies young Charlie Bucket to Wonka's factory. Who is Grandpa Joe? On Broadway, the Grandpa Joe was John Rubinstein, the original Pippin. Has there ever been a more disliked good guy character than Grandpa Joe? I mean, he just lays in bed with 3 other people, by the way, all day, contributes nothing to the family. Meanwhile, the mom is probably working 12 hours a day doing laundry to support herself, her young son, and these 4 bedridden adults. But when some free chocolate is on the table, suddenly old Grandpa Joe is hopping out of bed and dancing up a storm. Not cool, Joe. Not cool. Moving on to the wonderful Audra McDonald's category, your $200 clue is, in this musical, Audra McDonald played Sarah, the doomed woman who sings the heartbreaking song, Your Daddy's Son. What is Ragtime? Your Daddy's Son was written for Miss McDonald after the very first workshop of the musical Ragtime. The song was written basically overnight with Audra in the room working with composer Stephen Flaherty, which he talks about here on this clip from Working in the Theater.
Because Lynn and I had written the song together, for the most part, in the room together, and then I went off to my lonely little room at the Novotel across the street, trying to work on the arrangement. And I kept thinking, there's no inspiration in this pink and gray room. And so what I did is I brought the song to as far as I could bring it musically, and then brought Audra in and brought her into the process, watching her act, and I was getting so much just as an observer of the performance. I said, I have a little Walkman here. Do you mind if I turn this on? And basically I was acting as almost another actor, responding to her as if we were playing a scene together. And so I was sort of tailoring what the arrangement would become. And then by the end of the day we had the song, which hasn't changed a note since then.
No. Over in The Doctor Is In, the $200 clue is, when their car breaks down, newly engaged couple Brad and Janet find themselves the guest of Dr. Frank Furter in this cult classic musical. What is the Rocky Horror Show? Yes, the Rocky Horror Show, not the Rocky Horror Picture Show. That is the film version. That will usually irk a hardcore theater nerd if you add picture in there when you're talking about the stage show. It's like saying soundtrack instead of cast recording. It's one of those things that really drives theater nerds crazy for some reason. The film Rocky Horror Picture Show is, of course, famous for its midnight showings and all the audience participation that happens. I have never been to one of those midnight screenings, though. It's on my bucket list, it just hasn't happened. If you've been to one, let me know how it was. I did see the wonderful Broadway revival in 2000, though, on my very first trip to New York City. I saw 11 shows in 6 days. Pretty good.
I know, humble brag, humble brag, humble brag.
Your $200 clue for Kings of Broadway is, in The Lion King, young Simba expresses his excitement to take over the throne in this energetic song. What is I Just Can't Wait to Be King? A solid I Want song, especially for a child character. I Just Can't Wait to Be King brings the fantastical fun to the show after the awe-inspiring opening number, Circle of Life.
It's gonna be King Simba's finest day. Oh, I just can't wait, to be king.
And finishing out the overture round with the Queens of Broadway, your final $200 clue is, Whoopi Goldberg played the Queen in the 1997 television remake of this Rodgers and Hammerstein musical that also starred Brandy Norwood and Whitney Houston. What is Cinderella? The 1997 Disney remake of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella has become a much-loved classic as of late. The fervor from fans got the film put on Disney Plus, where you can now watch it anytime, and yet the soundtrack is still not available to stream anywhere. Make it make sense, Disney. The popular made-for-TV film series Descendants, about the kids of famous Disney fairy tale folk, just released a 4th installment called The Rise of Red, which my daughter is obsessed with, and in it, both Brandy and Paolo Montalban reprise their roles as Cinderella and Prince Charming, and it's just such a perfect cameo. I hope you all eased on down the road with that first round. It's time to move on to the only slightly harder $400 round now. Circling back to old folks, the $400 clue is, this is the name of the elderly cat who is the leader of the Jellicle tribe and the one who makes the Jellicle choice of who gets to go to the Heaviside Lair. Who is Old Deuteronomy? On Broadway, the original Old Deuteronomy was Ken Page. Mr. Page was the original Lion in The Wiz, but he is perhaps best known today as the voice of Oogie Boogie in The Nightmare Before Christmas. And actually, sadly, literally right before I went to film this episode, we found out that the great Ken Page has passed away at the age of 70. It's been a tough week for theater fans with the loss of the amazing Gavin Creel and now Ken Page. So rest in peace to both giants of musical theater. The $400 clue in the Audra McDonald category is, Miss McDonald won her first Tony Award for playing Carrie Pipperidge in this classic Rodgers and Hammerstein musical. What is Carousel? The 1992 London revival of Carousel, directed by Nicholas Heitner for the National Theatre, transferred to Broadway in 1994 and won 5 Tony Awards, including one for Audra Ann McDonald, as she was known back then, as well as Best Director, and the first ever Tony Award for Best Revival of a Musical. Before that year, there was simply a Best Revival Tony category, and plays and musicals battled each other.
With the hum of bees, the birds will make a racket in the churchyard trees. When I marry Mr. Snow.
Up next in the Doctor Is In category, the $400 clue is, in the musical Waitress, when Jenna first visits Dr. Pottimer, she naturally brings him one of these. What is a pie is the correct answer. Jenna works at Joe's Diner, where her specialty is making elaborate pies. The first one she gives Dr. Pottermer is called Mermaid Marshmallow. Sounds yummy. The doc initially refuses, saying he's off sugar, but soon the pie and the pie maker become irresistible.
It only takes a taste. It only takes a taste when you know it's good. Sometimes one bite is more than enough to know you want more of the thing you just gotta taste of.
The $400 clue for Kings of Broadway is King Charlemagne believes war is a science in this 1971 Stephen Schwartz musical, named after his eldest son. What is Pippin? King Charlemagne is actually a real figure from history. He ruled from 768 until his death in 814. As in the show, he did have a wife named Fastrada, his third wife actually, and he had a son named Louis who would succeed him as king. And he did have a son named Pippin, sometimes spelled as Pepin, who was a hunchback. Guess they left that part out of the musical. And now the Queens of Broadway category gives us the $400 clue. This is the kingdom that Queen Elsa rules over in the musical Frozen. What is Arendelle? The Broadway version of Frozen opened in 2018, and it was forced to shutter like all shows were for the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. But shockingly, Frozen decided not to reopen on Broadway. It was especially a shame because the wonderful Mackenzie Kurtz and Ciara Renee had just taken over for Anna and Elsa respectively, less than a month before shutting down. Moving right into the $600 round, let's spend some time with some old folks and the $600 clue. In Sondheim's Follies, a reunion of former showgirls is hosted by this man, the producer of the Follies, a stand-in for Florenz Ziegfeld. Who is Dimitri Weissman? Although you can have full points if you just said Weissman. Yes, Follies is a reunion of women who have appeared in the Weissman Follies. He even gets name-checked along with his real-life counterpart in the song Broadway Baby.
I may get to strut my stuff, working for a nice man, like a Ziegfeld or a Weissman.
Riding the wheels of a dream over to Miss McDonald's category, your $600 clue is, in yet another Tony-winning performance, Miss McDonald took on a title role in the 2012 revival of this groundbreaking musical by George and Ira Gershwin and DuBose Hayward. What is Porgy and Bess? This is another production close to my heart. I managed the merch for it, and at the time I really didn't know much of anything about the sometimes musical, sometimes opera. So while there are 8 performances a week, listening to the gorgeous score, I read 2 wonderful books about the creation and history of Porgy and Bess, The Life and Times of Porgy and Bess by Hollis Alpert, and the Gershwin's Porgy and Bess, a 75th anniversary celebration by Robin Thompson. It was a rare and wonderful opportunity to really immerse myself in the show. Also, Audra McDonald and Norm Lewis singing those songs every night? Forget about it. Heaven.
From this minute I'm telling you, I keep this phone in my
Up next in the Doctor is In category, the $600 clue is, this is the name of the tyrannical dentist in Little Shop of Horrors. What is Orin Scrivello?
Hey!
DDS. Sorry, doctor.
That's better.
Played in the iconic film version by Steve Martin, the film version of Little Shop contains a memorable scene with Bill Murray as a patient a little too excited by pain. That scene is not in the stage version of the show at all, but it is in the original Roger Corman film the musical is based on. There, the excruciatingly excited patient is none other than a young Jack Nicholson.
I'd almost rather go to the dentist than anywhere, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Now, no Novocaine. It dulls the senses.
Getting biblical now with Kings of Broadway, your $600 clue is: this is the King of Galilee, whom Jesus is brought to before standing trial with Pontius Pilate in the musical Jesus Christ Superstar. Who is King Herod? In Jesus Christ Superstar, King Herod is only featured in one scene, but gets a memorable solo simply called King Herod's Song. I've always enjoyed the late great Rick Mayall's version of it from the 2000 semi-pro shot version.
So you are the Christ. You're the great Jesus Christ. Prove to me that you're no fool. Walk across my swimming pool.
In the Queens of Broadway category, the final $600 clue is: Queen Agravain is the mother of the unmarried Prince Dauntless in this classic musical. What is Once Upon a Mattress? The comical retelling of The Princess and the Pea is currently on Broadway again, starring Sutton Foster, Michael Urie, and Anna Gasteyer as the Queen. The musical was actually part of last year's City Center Encore series, and I liked it plenty there. It was fun and cute, very classic Broadway. But I recently saw the transferred production and I was blown away. One of the funniest evenings I've spent at the theater in a long time. As of now, it's a limited run through the end of November, but I hope this production has a life after this. I actually think it would make a great pro shot, Thespis willing. Those first few rounds I think were on the easier side. It's time to really crank up the difficulty now with the $800 round. But before we do, you know the drill. Please, oh please, take this second to hit that like button for me if you're enjoying this week's game. It helps the algorithm show these videos to more fine folks like yourselves and makes me feel like a real king of niche musical theater trivia games. I'll take it. Thank you all, I really do appreciate it. Okay, let's take our jazzy scooters back to the old folks category. The $800 clue is a daily double. Answer part 1, you get the $800. Answer the harder second part, and you double the money. The 2-part clue is: this musical's whole plot is centered around the elderly residents of the Sussex Arms Retirement Hotel, and to save their building, the old folks turn to a life of crime. For double points, this is the expensive item that the gang focuses on stealing. What is 70 Girls 70 is the answer to part 1, and the answer to part 2 is fur coats. This sweet, odd little musical, 70 Girls 70, has a score by none other than John Kander and Fred Ebb. Among the more well-known songs in the show are Coffee in a Cardboard Cup and Yes, which was covered by Liza Minnelli in her legendary Liza with a Z concert.
Yes, I'll try. Yes, I'll dare. Yes, I'll fly. Yes, I'll share.
And yes, I do have a full breakdown of 70 Girls 70 that you can watch after this. Thank you for asking. Moving on to Miss McDonald's category, your $800 clue is: Miss McDonald portrayed Lizzie Curry, a spinster whose life is turned upside down when a so-called rainmaker bursts into town and sets his attention on her in this musical. What is 110 in the Shade? This production was at Studio 54, presented by the Roundabout Theater Company. It also starred the wonderful John Cullum and Steve Kazee as Bill Starbuck, the rainmaker who makes spinster Lizzie believe in love, and herself again. But it was the understudy for Bill Starbuck that would be significant for Miss McDonald. The understudy was Will Swenson, and after working together on that show, the two were married in 2012. The Doctor is in, and we'll see you now. The $800 clue is: Dr. Mark Bruckner is a psychiatrist who guides patient Daisy Gamble through her past lives in this long-titled musical. What is On a Clear Day You Can See Forever? The musical from 1965 got a short-lived revival in 2011, starring Harry Connick Jr. as Dr. Bruckner. In the original story, Dr. Bruckner falls in love with one of Daisy's past selves named Melinda Wells. For the 2011 revival, the production made Daisy a male named David. So when Dr. Bruckner falls in love with Melinda, she is in reality David, an openly gay man to boot. Act 1 ended with Harry Connick Jr. kissing David Turner, who played David. I saw a very early preview, and the gasps of shock and outrage from the diehard Harry Connick Jr. fans after that kiss was astonishing, let's just say that.
On a clear day, rise and look around you.
Well, talk about bad taste.
Up next for the Kings of Broadway category, the $800 clue is: this is King Arthur's illegitimate son who sings the song The Seven Deadly Virtues in the musical Camelot. Who is Mordred? Mordred's mother was sorceress Morgan Le Fay. The original Mordred was Roddy McDowall. McDowall was already a household name by 1960 when Camelot premiered, which makes his appearance in the relatively small role even more remarkable. Mordred doesn't even enter until Act 2 of the musical. And behind every good king of Broadway is a great queen of Broadway. Your $800 clue is: in 6, this is the first queen to sing her song. She's also the first wife of Henry VIII. Who is Catherine of Aragon? I couldn't have a category about queens on Broadway and not feature 6. The comments I would get, forget about it. Catherine gets to sing one of my favorite songs in the show, No Way. In New York, the OG Catherine was Adriana Hicks, who would go on to play Sugar in Some Like It Hot.
No matter what I heard, I didn't say a word, no, baby. You never said a word.
And with that, my friends, we've reached the big show, the main event. It's the $1,000 round. Let's hear that dramatic music. Good luck, players. Our last visit with the old folks gives us the $1,000 clue. In Barnum, Joyce Heth, a real-life attraction for P.T. Barnum, is said to be a whopping 161 years old. She sings all about it in this song. What is Thank God I'm Old? The real Joyce Heth was supposedly the wet nurse for our nation's first president, George Washington, though, as is the case with pretty much all of P.T. Barnum's claims, it was all humbug.
Step right up and see it, folks. Joyce Heth, George Washington.
When you see the shape the world is in, when the way it is ain't what it's been, when folks just care for gold, thank God I'm old.
Here she is, boys. Here she is, world. It's Audra McDonald and the $1,000 clue. Miss McDonald starred in this dark musical, loosely based on the play Medea for Lincoln Center Theater in 1999. What is Marie Christine is the answer. Though based on the Greek tragedy Medea, the musical was set in 1890s New Orleans. Besides Medea, Marie Christine also borrowed heavily from the real-life accounts of Marie Laveau, a self-proclaimed voodoo queen popular in New Orleans in the late 1800s. The score for Marie Christine is by Michael John LaChiusa and is cherished by many theater devotees. Our last trip to The Doctor is In category brings us the $1,000 clue. In the short-lived Sondheim musical Anyone Can Whistle, a Dr. Detmold is the head of the local insane asylum known as this. What is the cookie jar? The real name for the cookie jar is Dr. Detmold's Asylum for the Socially Pressured. The original production of Anyone Can Whistle starred Angela Lansbury and Lee Remick as a nurse from the cookie jar named Faye Apple. Though Anyone Can Whistle only lasted less than a month on Broadway, its Sondheim score is a treasured one, with songs like With So Little to Be Sure Of, Everybody Says Don't, and the title song. Our last royally difficult clue in the Kings of Broadway category is: this musical, with a score by Richard Rodgers and Sheldon Harnick, is about the life of King Henry VIII. What is Rex is the correct answer. Rex was one of several relatively unsuccessful musicals Richard Rodgers worked on late in life with various lyricists after his longtime partner Oscar Hammerstein II passed away in 1960. Besides being a rare outright flop for Richard Rodgers, the musical from 1976 is notable for featuring a young Glenn Close starting her extraordinary career playing Henry VIII's daughter, Mary. And last but certainly not least, the $1,000 clue for Queens of Broadway is: this two-time Tony-winning actress played Queen Elizabeth in Diana the Musical. Who is Judy Kaye? One of those theater performers that is always a delight to see. Judy Kaye won her first Tony for originating the role of Carlotta in The Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. She was also the original Emma Goldman in Ragtime and the original Rosie in Mamma Mia. Besides the Queen, in Diana the Musical, she also played Barbara Cartland, the eccentric romance novelist and Diana's step-grandmother. I think that no matter what your opinion is of Diana the Musical, I think we can all agree that Judy Kaye was amazing in her big solo, An Officer's Wife.
This frightened young girl with so much to prove. An officer's wife. Whatever became of that officer's wife?
Now we've reached the final Jeopardy round, everyone. Tally up your scores and decide how much you want to wager with the category Biographical Musicals. These are musicals all about a real-life figure. Has everyone made their wagers? Joey and Peter? Christopher, April, and Izzy B? Okay, here is your final clue. This flop show starred Carolee Carmello as real-life evangelical preacher Amy Semple McPherson. What is scandalous? Amy Semple McPherson was a fascinating figure in history. She was a devout evangelical who was the first to use mass media like the radio to grow her flock to tremendous proportions. She dominated the news cycle when she was violently kidnapped and went missing for several weeks. But was that true, or was it all fabricated to cover up her running away with her married boyfriend? As I said, it's an interesting true story, which made the disappointing musical all the more frustrating. Though Carolee Carmello as the scandalous preacher did her damnedest, as she always does. And that's this week's game, my friends. How did you all fare this week? Be sure to let me know your scores in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. I know I don't always respond, but I do read each and every comment. If you enjoy Broadway Jeopardy, please continue to share it on your social media. I'd really love to grow these videos and keep making them weekly, and I would really love to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. A special thanks again to the wonderful Joy Easterling for her category pick this week. All of my patrons over on Patreon are near and dear to my heart. I literally couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you. If you want to check out the Patreon, there is a link in the description, as well as a link to my merch shop with fun theater designs, lots of Schmigadoon inspired ones, and some new Broadway Jeopardy swag too. And it's another really great way to support me and the channel. And you can always follow me on Twitter or Instagram at BWayGhostlight as well. I'll be back next week with 26 all-new clues and 5 new categories, but until then, I'm Mark Bonanni. This is Broadway by Ghostlight. Thanks for playing.